This is an axe, one of mankind's oldest and most primitive tools.
These tools are so old, in fact, that the earliest axes would have actually been made of something like a rock, which is, it's pretty wild.
Well, despite being a professional bladesmith and having made lots of cool swords and knives, I've never actually made an axe before. So today, we're gonna do just that. All right, so we're about to start forging out this axe, and we have to address a little bit of a problem. And that is, I've never forged an axe before. I don't know what I'm doing. All that being said, I have spent many hours watching Nils Ogren over here on YouTube to try to learn and figure out some different methods of approach for this project. It seems there are several different ways of doing it. Two of the most common ways being that you can punch a hole in a block of steel and then drift it, and that's how you create the eye for the axe, and you forge it out the rest of the way from there. It also seems there's another technique where you can literally fold material around and forge weld it, creating your eye that way. I really want to give this second attempt a go, especially given the material that we're going to be using, as I think it's going to create a better result for the design of axe that I'm choosing to go for. Chopping off a piece of 200-year-old wrought iron from an old post vise that I cut up on a previous video. This material is going to be absolutely awesome because whenever you etch it later on, it's just going to have the most beautiful wood grain-like pattern, which is going to add to the overall look of things so much. That being said, once we get it cut, we're going to throw it in the fire and begin to squish it down into a more rectangular billet before we move on to the next step. So let's do it. Alright, so now our billet is down into a more workable size. Basically, the next step is, if I understand the process correctly, is I need to make some isolations to separate a sort of middle portion that'll end up being the back of our axe. Then from there, we're going to separate two more portions on the edges where our sort of piece is going to wrap around and forge weld together. To do this, I'm just going to insert what's called a hardy block into my anvil, and this will give me a nice crisp edge to be able to make these isolations look really good. That way all the forging is really clean and the shaping goes well. So let's go ahead and do that. That is no good. We're going to try to put a little bit of flux in there and see if we can't get this thing to forge weld back together. I got to get this closed up because if this doesn't stick, the whole project could be toast. All right, let's go ahead and see if it takes. So good. Let's go back to the isolations and keep working this down. Now that our isolations have been made, I'm going to start working on what's called the lugs, or the sort of like cheeks of the axe, if you will. To do this, I'm basically going to use a cross peen to help pull that material out, and then working back and forth on the horn of the anvil, try to profile this to the kind of double lug shape that I'm going for. This style is very reminiscent of Viking style axes, and if you're good enough like Nils is, you can get this really close just at the anvil. I, however, totally didn't run over to the grinder and help to profile things. Totally not. Anyway, so now we have our shape made up and our isolations are good. We're now going to begin to fold it. And this is the most horrifying part because this is where it all could go wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and just slowly start to bring that wrought iron around, and we'll see what happens. So what's happening is the wrought iron began to split on me. So now I have to be really careful and hope that I don't shear this off as I continue to fold. There's a chance that I can bring this back, but now we have our main body of our axe forged and forged welded. It looks absolutely awesome. There's just one big problem in the fact that it's wrought iron. So it's not a very good steel to be used for like a hard cutting edge. So to fix this, we now have to insert some high carbon steel into our axe head. I'm going to turn my attention now back to the eye of the axe and use what's called a drift, which essentially is just a tool. I forged this out of some stock that I had laying around, which actually ended up being Damascus, so that's kind of fun and a good waste of steel. I'm not upset about it. But after I'd sort of banged that out and shaped it roughly on the grinder, I moved on to trying to clean up the eye of this axe. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Ian, that axe does not look like it's completely forged. And no, it's not. As I began to forge on the eye of the axe, the wrought iron that had split previously during a previous step began to tear apart again, and I began to lose all confidence in this actually being able to be a functional tool. Now I know in the last few videos it seemed like all I have done is failed these projects from the get-go, and the reason that I leave these parts in is because this is the way that the craft typically goes. You typically have a learning period, and at least in my case, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to forging axes. I really have been excited about this process, and I love the fact that we can just throw another iron in the fire and try again, and that is exactly what we're going to do. And yeah, onward. It is now the next day, and we have a forged axe. Now, I went ahead and cleaned up the profile on the belt grinder, and now we're going to move on to heat treating it and hopefully put a handle on it by the end of tonight. Then we get to test this thing, and I'm really excited to chop some wood with the axe. Word. Oh, hey, I didn't see you over there. So we might have just gotten the axe head done last night. However, I did not put a handle on it yet. So now we're gonna go ahead and make a handle so that we can have an axe. All right, let's make a lot of wood dust. It's time to chop some wood and make a fire!